Hello and welcome to episode 57, where we have a very special guest, WCAT legend, and also just a big personality in the sports world. We've got Wiley Ballard. Wiley, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I think legendary status was probably handed out a little too easily for me. I think I was here for 2 years when WCAT was actually running, but obviously love my time here, and I'm flattered by you donning me with the legend label. I might dispute it, but I appreciate it.
Well, Wiley, you've gone from broadcasting at the high school level all the way to the professional. You've seen a lot of stuff. Can you give a brief, because some of the fans don't know, just a brief overview of what you've done in your career, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, so I graduated from Westminster in 2012. I went to Georgia Tech, called their baseball games, starting as a student, and still do so today. When I graduated college, I started working on the football radio side for Georgia Tech. I was their sideline reporter for about 5 or 6 years. And then I did some television sideline for ACC football with Bally Sports. I'd done a lot of work for the Braves radio network over the years, some work at Auburn with some of their digital stuff, volleyball, softball, basketball, all sorts of things over there. And then obviously this past year, I had a chance to do some sideline for the Braves with Bally, and that was a dream come true and then some. So I'm really enjoying some time off right now, to be quite honest with you. These 6 months were both very exciting, but also very stressful.
Yeah, I've seen you post on your story and just on TV as well, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's doing another sport and another event. It's honestly really impressive. But diving back into high school, WCAT started your junior year. What made you want to go into it?
My friends, my classmates from elementary school who ended up coming to Westminster with me, and we're still close to this day, they'll attest that by the time I was about 7 or 8 years old, I was talking about trying to be a sports announcer. So I always had an interest in it. And I'll never forget, I was working a summer camp called Inspira. Daniel Surl was running it, because he runs about 90% of the things on this campus, it feels like. But he asked, hey, we're starting a broadcasting club, you got interest? And Dan had no idea that I'd been interested in that. I'd already been looking at colleges where I could do it by that time, and I said absolutely. And so we did the Heard County scrimmage. It rained, we used walkie-talkies, and everything got better from there.
And then talking about your start at Westminster, do you have a game that really sticks out to you as like, this is when you kind of thought, holy cow, I'm good at this, and people are recognizing it?
I think I feel like where I really started to gain some confidence, because when I was in school, Bill McGann was doing the play-by-play, and so I was kind of the color analyst who was able to give insight into what this guy's like in class, or that type of stuff. I felt like, so when Bill, after the 2012 football season, stepped down from play-by-play to go coach, and I was at Georgia Tech at the time, and Daniel Surl called me and said, hey, you want to do it? I said, absolutely. And so I think, to me, my fondest memories, and I think, moments where I thought, like, wow, I feel like I'm making a contribution, was probably 2014 and 15, those playoff runs. Talking with Coach Romberg, and we're still in touch to this day, obviously. I think that was where I really felt like, wow, I actually am playing a small role in what is a wildly unexpected run of successful football at Westminster, at least compared to when I was in high school.
Yeah. And then you were there for the first 2 initial years of WCAT, and now kind of coming back and kind of seeing like what it's become now. What are your opinions? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think my first thought is, look at this monster we've created. No, it's wild, man. I mean, I remember we did a news show, to try like kind of a daily news thing, and we just had a desk essentially. We had Katie Gregg and Virginia Anderson were sitting at the desk doing the news, and we had a smart board in the background, and it was fine. We thought it was great, but now looking at the studio you guys have and the equipment and all these sorts of things. I mean, I think Tim McCauley texted me last week, said you guys had like a first down yellow line marker now. Yeah, that's insane. So it's hard really to describe, quite honestly. And I think I was heavily involved there when I was in college. Still, I was still kind of around, but now that I'm not in the week to week like I was there for a few years, and I come back, it just feels like every time I come back, you guys have like advanced like 4 stages, So no, it's been really cool. I just really marvel at honestly what the students do as well. I mean, I think you get kids starting in 5th and 6th grade getting involved, and everyone is just really impressive, quite honestly.
And when you talk about WCAT, you can't help but mention, as you already talked about a little bit, Mr. Surl, just kind of like the god figure of it all. What does he mean to you, and like how has he helped you along your journey?
Well, he's the legend, and I mean that sincerely. I mean, I think a lot of Westminster alumni can point to a teacher that had a really profound impact on who they are, not just professionally, but as a human being. I think Dan is that guy for me. There's a couple others in there for sure, but I remember meeting him for the first time in 8th grade. He was subbing for Marjorie Mitchell's economics class, and he was acting. He's Surl. He's kind of goofy. I was kind of goofy, and we kind of vibed right then and there. And so I started getting involved in some of the Latino initiatives he had on campus, and that kind of continued our relationship, and then WCAT started. But no, he's been a source of encouragement. I think he's been someone who's helped me instill self-confidence, and I think a lot of teachers at Westminster have that effect. But no, Dan's the legend, and just again, I tell people every time I'm asked about this, what he did so well was he made it so much fun. He empowered the students, but while also challenging you guys. I mean, you want to start a podcast, start a podcast. You got to go do it. I'm not going to help you, but go do it. And so I think just that type of, leadership, I think is the major reason, along with the commitment from, a lot of Westminster alumni and the school itself. He's the reason WCAT is what it is today.
And then you graduated Westminster 2012, went down the street to Georgia Tech. Talk to me about what it was like finding opportunities to continue to broadcast or be involved in sports at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I really pushed myself out of my comfort zone, staying within the perimeter and moving like 2 miles south. My freshman year of college, or high school, I went to a lot of Georgia Tech baseball games, and I would listen to them on the radio. I just became a Georgia Tech baseball fan, and I found out that the guy who was announcing was actually a student at Tech, and so I went up and said, "Hey, man, like, Are you just announcing the games?" And they said, "Yep." And I was like, is it hard to get opportunities? He said, "Nope, they're desperate. Nobody here wants to announce the baseball games." And I was like, "Really?" And so I was a freshman at Westminster, but I kind of filed that in the back of my head, and I was like, that'd be a pretty great opportunity. And then the other thing, and this is again where Dan really helped get me connected as a high school senior, talking to some play-by-play voices, around the Atlanta area, whether it's West Durham with the Falcons, Steve Holman with the Hawks, Dave Cohen does Georgia State, and kind of asking them, if you were in my shoes and I want to go into, this field, what would you do? What are you trying to major in? What opportunities should I look for? What school's like a good fit? And the universal feedback and advice I got was, don't worry about the degree. So long as you're willing to network yourself. You might have to do a little more of the heavy lifting as far as trying to meet people and those types of things. But if you can get on the air as a freshman, go do that, bar none. And again, that was the advice I got. I think you've seen people have success doing similar to what I've done. You have seen people had success who go to the top journalism schools in the country too. So I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. But that was kind of, to me, what really pushed me over into the I'm going to go to Georgia Tech and announce the baseball games. And the other piece is I really just did not want to go to a college town. My sister, my brother both did. They loved it. It's awesome. That just was not my speed. So Atlanta was really attractive just because I knew, it was a big market. That professional teams and opportunities to intern and those things.
And then you mentioned kind of just taking any opportunity you can get, especially as a younger guy trying to make your way. What are kind of some of the more unique opportunities you kind of landed across and maybe you didn't expect yourself to be there?
Yeah, I remember my freshman year I did a swim and dive meet in college. I had never done swim and dive at Westminster. I didn't know the first thing about it. I mean, I knew the basic butterfly and I don't know the names of freestyle and all that stuff, but that was it. So thrown into the deep end, haha, pun. Didn't expect that. I also had a chance to work with some people with AT&T on a social media campaign or something as a freshman, and I went to go I had to go order food at the varsity or something. That was kind of the bit. So that was bizarre. I think the best example probably though is flag football. I think when GHSA started flag football about 4 years ago, Falcons were a huge part of that, obviously for the girls. they sanctioned it as a sport, and all of a sudden, once it's sanctioned by the GHSA, there's state championships, and obviously they want to cover those, and they're going to attach it to the tackle football championships, and they needed a play-by-play announcer for it. And GPB called me up and said, have you ever done flag football? And I said no, and then I said no, and I went, but I'm very confident I can do it, and I will learn everything, and I'm supremely confident that I can do it, which is kind of the advice that I've been told. It's just, even if you don't know something, you got to trust yourself. I can figure it out by the time it comes to deliver. So yeah, I'd say flag football is probably the best example of something that I didn't anticipate when I started.
And you've clearly done a ton of different sports. How do you go into a new sport? What are the first things you want to pick up about it? And then, how do you go to the level where you can confidently talk about what you're seeing down on the court or field?
Yeah, I think, obviously every game's different because there's different players and coaches, so different characters. So, regardless if you've done 1,000 baseball games, if you're going to do the 1,000 at first, you got to figure out who the players are, who the coaches are. that research doesn't really change. I can tell you right now, there are sports that I feel more comfortable than others, and so, I think you got to know the rules. Obviously, that's a big piece of it. And then I think, and I've talked to a lot of guys about this, but your goal is when you're doing the sport, more times you do it, hopefully at some point it slows down. Kind of if you're playing the sport itself, you can anticipate, what's going to happen or what to look for, whether that's football, basketball, softball, baseball. I think just doing it a lot not only gives you, the ability to recognize and anticipate what may happen on the field, but also the pace of the broadcast, what questions to ask, and what things to point out, So I think more than anything, it's just reps and doing it over and over. To be fair, I think most sports fans, just growing up, it's rare you're going to be introduced to a sport where you don't know the first rule, right? You just pick up so much by watching growing up. So, I think flag football might have been the closest thing to that. So, we went and watched a bunch of regular season games that year and kind of talked to coaches about what their strategies were. And just, it's like anything you're covering in journalism. You just try and, ask questions of informed people and try and learn.
And you talked about preparation, which is something that happens so much before announcing that a lot of people don't see. But what is kind of your usual kind of prep that you like to do before calling a game on play-by-play?
So I think, there's obviously everybody's kind of got their process. I don't think anybody's is the exact same, and I think anyone would tell you whatever works for you. The end goal, if you think about what do I actually want out of all this prep, is I want to know that if I have a good nugget, or there was a story I read that week, I know exactly where it is. I can access it immediately. So you have to be organized to where, so-and-so makes a catch, and, it was his birthday last, Wednesday, and they did this. You want to make sure you have the details of whatever that story is available so you can make sure you deliver, you hit the points, and do it in a concise way, too. I think that's also critical, especially if you're doing a sport like basketball or hockey where everything's just flying around real fast. But no, and then as far as getting that information, I think you start with – I think there's a few things. One, obviously stats, that's a great place to start if you have them. But honestly, it's probably the least interesting thing you're going to talk about during the broadcast. So, have them there, make sure you've got access to them. But I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time, looking up, 5 different stats on one guy because, you're probably going to get one in. And I think, honestly, and this is the next step, you try and read all the coverage, beat writers, and obviously that's going to depend on if you're doing the Atlanta Braves, there's going to be, 1,500 different articles you can read. And so it's almost a matter of trying to pick and choose what's relevant. Whereas if you're doing a high school game, I'm doing one this Friday, there's very little coverage. And so when you don't have that, that access to the, a lot of coverage, I think you try and reach out to people with the team. I think my routine on a high school sport is I try and reach out to the head coach. I ask him, hey, can you share stats? Can you share a depth chart? Roster, and then, hey, do you have 20 to 30 minutes later this week to where I can talk to you? And so at that point before that conversation, I can go through the numbers, go through the depth chart, kind of see if there's anybody does have some coverage. Maybe so-and-so's the third generation or something to play for, X high school, or maybe, they've, started playing as a sophomore and they're an absolute stud, or so, there's so many different examples. But trying to have that information so you can ask informed questions on the phone call. And I think that's where you get your anecdotes, get your best, most human, relatable, pieces of content, as opposed to, it's the third time he's had 3 catches or more in the first half this season. That's fine, but I don't think anybody's like, oh yeah, that's so interesting.
And then also like being able to announce like your hometown games, and kind of how do you balance that objectivity with like personality and kind of maintain professionalism?
Well, I think I do think that since if you go look at pictures of me when I was 15, like I can show you one where I've got a Georgia Tech hat on, a Braves jacket, like a Hawks t-shirt, like, I was all about it. And look, I still ride and die with a lot of those teams in a lot of respects. However, I think, I heard people tell me this when I was getting into it, that the longer you're in the industry, you start to sort of root for people more than you do teams. Like, hey, that I like that guy, or she's easy to root for, or something like that. So I almost worry more about that objectivity as opposed to just like rooting for my hometown teams. But what I've found is this year in particular, you're there to do a job, and I think. Again, I have found like my love for sports is different, but it's still very passionate, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not so much focused on the outcome as I am just about like how hard and how much time people invest, especially at the higher levels. I mean, just the level of commitment by those, it's just really, really, to me, it excites me to be able to cover people who are very passionate and devote so much time. I think it's, passion's kind of contagious. And so I think that's really something that's carried with me. And then the last thing I'll say, and going to the hometown stuff, is I think that was probably the coolest part of doing the Brave stuff this year, especially in April when I was doing every game, was, if I'd been doing this for the, let's say Detroit Tigers, like, I would have been so excited. It would have been dream come true. I would have been like just on seventh heaven, but nobody else would have really like known. Like, I didn't like go to high school. A bunch of Tigers fans were like, "Oh my gosh, I was watching the Tigers and the Twins last night. Oh man, yes, you were great." But I think because I was doing it in Atlanta, that made it really, really cool. Because I don't know if I'm going to be here long term. I mean, I think ultimately my goal is to do Major League Baseball play-by-play, and that can be Atlanta, the West Coast, Midwest. I mean, wherever. I mean, Timbuktu, whatever. If there's a team and there's an opportunity, I would go. But to have this experience this past year was just really cool, and I felt like I was able to share, a lot of my joy with a lot of people who'd known me for a long, long time, especially people from Westminster who, saw me doing WCAT, as a junior. I mean, I saw a guy, this past weekend who I hadn't probably seen in 5 years, and we hung out, and at the end, say, like, by the way, like, every time you're doing the Braves, that's just the coolest thing ever. And I was like, I appreciate it, man. It was just really cool to see kind of the amount of people reach out and the relationships that are still there.
I remember earlier this season watching the Braves game for the first time. I was like, is that Wiley Ballard on the TV? Because I didn't know that you were doing it, and it was honestly crazy. So you got to be like practically in the dugout the whole season. What was it like just like watching a team so close, and are there any moments that really stuck out to you? You're like, wow, I'm on the field.
I think first and like the one that jumps out to me, like the walk-off on opening day for the home, or I should say the home opener, Austin Riley, which ended up being a pretty big game because it was against the Diamondbacks and the tiebreaker and all that. But that was surreal. That was definitely like, I'm doing the Braves game. It's the home opener and about to go interview Austin Riley after a walk-off. I think Hank Aaron was really cool. I mean, my dad's from Atlanta, and obviously, I've got a good appreciation for what Hank meant to it, and still honestly still means to Atlanta. So doing that night was really cool. Those are probably the first two, and then getting Dodger Stadium was the last series I was there for in that run to start the year, and obviously didn't go super well for the Braves, but doing a game there, just knowing the history of that place was really cool. So I'd say those are the moments that stand out to me. And again, I've just been such a big baseball fan. Those meant a lot. As far as like personality moments or like things like you see that you're just like, I can't believe like I'm this close to that. Like, I don't know. Marcell Ozuna, I will say this Marcell Ozuna has a different handshake with not just every teammate, but like every staff member anybody who is like within range to shake hands, he has like his own like tailored handshake for you. And so like for me, he would like dap me up, we'd like high five, and then he'd go like, yeah. I was like the sideline reporter. So like it's just he's a trip, man. So getting to see him, he's really just kind of a larger than life figure. And then I'm trying to think of it. I mean, I think the other bigger personalities, like seeing it, like Ozzy and Orlando interact is just hysterical because obviously they're kind of on the end of the dugout that I'm on, and just like I speak a little Spanish, but like you don't need to. Like it's very clear they're just roasting each other over something, and it's pretty entertaining.
And you've been broadcasting it on air for years going into that, but were you a little bit nervous going into it? Like, what was the feeling like first time, like when the lights were on?
I don't think I've had a more stressful like 2-week period in my life. I mean, seriously, because and again, like it was magnified, at least in my mind, because it was the Braves, and because like I knew like everybody I know was gonna be watching. It was opening day, like it was like. So yeah, it was exciting. It was stressful, and then of course we got rained out the first game, and so like it was another day to stress and worry about it. I think I relaxed by about like the 10th game, but for about like a week and a half, like every morning, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta do this again. I think once we got through the Hank Aaron game, I think I was like, all right, like those are the three, like opening day, home opener, Hank Aaron, like those are the three like big shows. Like there's a lot of attention paid, not just by fans, but by, obviously people within the organization. And, I was pretty much a total unknown at that point. So I just wanted to make sure that, I represented, Bally and the Braves well, and, was able to, just do it justice. That's the biggest thing. I think one of the reasons it felt so outsized for me was because I just held the Braves in such high regard, because like that's the team I grew up watching. Like, that meant a lot, and I just wanted to make sure like I was, equal to the stage, if that makes sense.
And then at this point, you're probably sick of talking about it, but I think that's half of what anyone remembers is the milkshake at Guaranteed Rate Field. Talk me through that whole experience.
Yeah, so we knew we wanted to do something when we got there. Like we knew like even before the Philly series, they were advertising on Twitter and like, well, Wiley, you're doing this. I said, okay. I also have like a terrible sweet tooth. Like that's my biggest vice. There are worse vices to have, but like I am bad about sugar. So it was an easy sell. They didn't have to, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Do you want to do it multiple days? Anyway, so, we're in the rain delay, and, it's time to, I'd actually left to go get the milkshake before we hit the rain delay, and all of a sudden the rain delay happens. They're like, wow, we need you to get it back. I'm like, well, they're selling the milkshake like in left field, and I was like at first base. So it was a long hike over there, but got back. And I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants when we're doing that. I'm trying to just basically do play-by-play of eating a milkshake and be entertaining. And, it's funny. I mean, for me personally, I spent so much time trying to learn baseball and trying to, make sure I had the nuts and bolts down of broadcasting and trying to be informed and, be qualified, if you will. And then, you kind of look back on it and you say, well, probably the most memorable thing I did was the milkshake thing, which I think I think that's a good thing, because I think it's kind of a reminder for me, like as much as I get, I love baseball. I find it fascinating. Like I read, a lot of stuff about it, but at the end of the day, like for our audience, like we're just trying to entertain and have people like relax and chill out. So I think to me, it was almost kind of like a reminder of like, oh yeah, like I'm here to entertain and more just like sort of be a relatable human being. I don't need to be a baseball like savant. Like if I can throw that stuff in there, great. But I think more than anything, people just want to see you having fun, and it's baseball, it's entertainment. This is we're not reporting on the White House or on the stock exchange.
Mm-hmm. I know you and Brandon Godden also have a little bit of a kind of a banter going on back and forth. Westminster actually mentioned a couple times here and there. Yeah. So what's that relationship kind of been like? What kind of influence has he had on you?
He's had a pretty heavy influence. I think a lot of people don't know he got the job as the voice of Georgia Tech after Wes Durham left, and Wes was there my freshman year, but when I was a sophomore, Brandon got hired. So I met Brandon when I was a sophomore in college, and got to know him through that, obviously. And I was clear about, what I wanted to do professionally. And, again, Georgia Tech has, maybe 1-2 people on campus who want to do that. So it wasn't like there were 30, 40 students knocking down his door. So I think I was able to, learn a lot from him, about what had worked for him in his career and strategies and what was important, the mechanics of calling a game. And so we stayed in touch. Obviously, he's lived in Atlanta ever since he moved here over 10 years ago. We'd get lunch occasionally. I'd ask him, hey, this opportunity, that opportunity. And then it was surreal, 2 years ago when all of a sudden the Braves job is open and he's going to get hired for it. And I was so excited because I had loved working with him so much. And then a year later, I had a chance to be on the air with him, which for as long as we had known each other, we had never been on the air on the same show together. So I felt like it was really easy. Just because, we kind of had that banter off the air for the last 10 years. So, it was kind of the same thing. And I think that was also one of the biggest blessings of doing it in Atlanta and with the Braves in Bally, because I had been on that show the last, 4 years, and I'd been in the truck. I knew everybody. I knew, the replay guys. I knew the producers. I knew the camera guys, the audio guys, I knew everybody, on that show. And, I could not have been placed in a more comfortable situation. Yes, I was, wildly stressed the first week and a half. But I also, every face was familiar, and I felt like they were, do their best to, help me succeed. And I think that made it 3,000 times easier. So in some ways, Brandon, yes, 100%. He would be kind of the face of that, but I felt like I had 30 other Brandons, around in my corner. So I think I'm just really grateful for how that worked out.
And you've been able to announce not only on TV but also on radio. What are some of the biggest adjustments you have to make in calling a game to do that?
Oh, I think I think first and foremost, the reporter role is obviously very different than being in the booth anyway. But if you're doing play-by-play on TV versus play-by-play on radio, I think the old adage is the numbers are kind of loose, but television is the analyst medium. I think the idea is the analyst almost should be speaking more of the play-by-play guy on television. The play-by-play guy can give captions, he can be the traffic cop, all this and that, but you don't have to paint the picture. Therefore, let the analyst dive in and give, describe what we're seeing in this picture. Whereas radio is kind of flipped, where I think play-by-play is doing the majority of the talking. Color can kind of sprinkle it in there every once in a while. And it's just basic stuff, right? You got to call every pitch. You got to describe where the defense is playing. You got to describe, what, is the sun out or is it cloudy? Is it a packed house, or is it, maybe don't bring attention to it not being as packed, but, what's the crowd like? All those sorts of things. What's the body language of the pitcher? I think that's also really important. The stuff that you don't even have to mention on television because it's self-evident by looking at the screen. Is somebody sweating through their jersey? Is somebody, tugging at their elbow because they don't, they got some kind of tightness or something going on there? You just have to be hyper aware of you're trying to say everything. And I listen to a lot of baseball radio in general. And so I think it's one of the most valuable things you can do is be in the seat of the listener, listen to it and figure out what you like and what you don't like, and even catch yourself I was kind of tuned out there for the last 10 seconds. Because I think the biggest mistake or not the biggest, but one of the mistakes you can make doing play-by-play is thinking everyone's hanging on your every word. They're not, and that's that's okay. So don't be afraid to repeat things, or don't assume that I said this in the second inning, I don't need to say it again in the seventh. The amount of people who are listening to a baseball game on the radio all 9 innings is pretty much zero. So you can repeat yourself fine. So I think those are important things to remember.
And when you take a step back from the booth, either from the TV or radio, and you're watching a game or listening, do you find yourself listening to the announcer more or the game more as just a fan?
Oh, I think I think the announcer for sure. It's actually funny. I went out to dinner last night to one of the sports bars or whatnot, and part of me went there because I didn't want to listen to the announcers because I wanted to watch the game more than anything. But I think you can't help it. I think if you talk to anybody who directs live sports, they're just watching the camera choices. If you talk to a producer, they're are they going to replay that or not? I think you can't help it. I'm sure if you're working in any type of industry, when you're observing something that's you spend a lot of your time doing, you can't help it. But to me, I also think I can really appreciate it too. Like I don't find it to be a burden or like an obstacle. Like I can't enjoy something except occasionally when I go to a sports bar and want to not listen to them. But.
And is there any announcer or any call that is really memorable with you that you've kind of either looked up to or really like admired the call or just the announcer in general?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I think, look, I grew up a Georgia Tech fan, so I think West Durham, when Calvin Johnson made that catch against Clemson in 2004, he's lived up to the legendary billing. I think I remember that one vividly, but you're 8 years old, like and this is the coolest thing you've ever heard. So, it's pretty crazy. As far as like more national stuff, actually, if you go back and look at my senior yearbook, one of my quotes is just a Vin Scully call, the Kirk Gibson home run in '88, and it's awesome. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened, which I kind of equated to me graduating high school, but that's why I chose it. But yeah, I think those two for sure. I think Vin Scully's call, Hank Aaron hitting 715 is really good. I mean, they're all good. Milo's was great. I mean, it was all good. I'm trying to think of. Again, I'm such a baseball guy. That's kind of where my head goes. I'm trying to think of a non-Vin Scully one. I mean, I think the Joe Carter touch them all in '93 World Series is up there for sure. To win it.
Poor Larry Crown.
Yeah, well, French, golly, man, that guy's got a gift for stumbling into things. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'd say those are probably the big one. I mean, and then like personal experience, things that happened that I was like alive for. Jason Hayward's home run opening day, I was there and just listening to Welcome to the Show and that type of thing. That stuff's special because you're in such. I mean, I think you guys will find like there's. You can watch teams your whole life, but like the guys who were playing when you were in high school, like you're like those guys were the best, man. So enjoy it.
And then just a couple more questions because I know we've gone a little bit over the time limit. But game day superstitions going into, do you have any rituals that you like to do before the broadcast starts that you're just like, I need to do this or else something's going to go amiss?
Honestly, I mean, eat. But that's probably it. I really don't. I'm trying to think. Like, there are certain the way my desk is organized, but I don't really view that as superstition. It's more, it's just like knowing like where I'm at, right? And so as far as like superstitious stuff, not really. Maybe I was never superstitious, which I think is odd for somebody who grows up a big sports fan. But I just was like, don't be ridiculous, Wiley. This has no influence on anything.
And now, if you could like call any game, so past, future, of any like particular sporting, like any one game where you're like, oh, I wish I was able to call that game. Anything that comes to mind?
Ooh, I mean, like a lot. I mean, how could you not say like Game 7 of the '92 NLCS, like the walk-off, like Sid Bream scoring, which was oddly enough, it was my mom's first Braves game she'd ever been to in her life. And she looked at my dad on the way home, and she's like, "Man, baseball's a lot of fun. Are they all like this?" And my dad's like, "No, they're not. But I'm glad you had fun." And then winning the World Series in 2021, like that was awesome. It was odd because it was kind of like a done deal there for like an hour. It felt like. I mean, Atlanta sports, whatever occurs, but it was like felt like it was going to happen. Not the first time we felt that, but I think those two probably be at the top.
Yeah, I think me personally, Game 6 of that 2021 NLCS is probably
that crossed my mind for sure.
That was the Rosario homer, the Matzik strikeouts. Yeah. That was a great game. And then just to wrap it up, we ask it to any guest. If you give one piece of advice to a younger Wiley Ballard or any younger announcer in general, what would that piece of advice be?
Go back and listen to yourself, like, quickly. Mm-hmm. That's something that took me a while. Like, it's extremely uncomfortable. Yeah. But I think it can help. So, like, you can just fix things and that are so much easier, as opposed to making bad habits because you don't even know you're doing them. Mm-hmm. So I think that would probably be the biggest thing. And as far as Wiley Ballard, the play-by-play announcer, as far as like Wiley Ballard, the human being, I think I did a pretty good job of it. But like, raise your hand in class, like get involved. Honestly, I think that's like a huge part of it. I think that really helped me in college too. It kind of separates you apart from your peers. You can build a relationship, with a professor, and I'm not even saying because it's going to help your grades or whatnot. I just think it makes the experience a lot better. And there's some pretty special teachers. Not only at the college level, but like here at Westminster. I literally had breakfast with Eddie Dupriest yesterday, who taught me English 12 years ago, and we were catching up and talking Braves and all sorts of things about life. Like, I remember sitting there being like, man, I wish I remember we used to do this every day. I kind of miss that. So, yeah, I think just invest in relationships. I think that's really, as you get older, that's for me, that's one of the reasons I get out of bed.
Yeah. Well, Wiley, thank you so much for joining us. That was so much fun, and good luck with your call this Friday, and also
appreciate it
down the line with the rest of your endeavors.
Yeah, no, good luck to you guys. We were talking before. This is a classic example of what WCAT can do. You guys just start this up as sophomores, and this is episode 57.
Yeah.
So this is really cool, and I think you guys will remember. Like, this will be a big part of your high school memories, and it's really special. So, I'm proud of you guys. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned as we go on to the softball field later today, but you guys will see that in probably about a week from now. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Go Cats.